and I do not like being left alone in our apartment. And so I told my father that, you should stop doing this. I'm scared, and you can do it when I'm a teenager, but I don't like it right now. So I asked him that, but he's like, no, you shouldn't do that. I mean, in fact, now we're going to go out for a walk every evening. So so then he's like, you know what, you should just do it, and after some time you're just going to be fine with it. So I said, okay, then. And it actually worked. For the first night, I was probably pretty freaked out, and I just stayed in my bed. But then after that, I felt fine about it, and I was completely fine. And now he just does that every night. It doesn't make a difference. And so yeah, basically it's facing fears, and that's I think what I found most relevant about this. And it's it's almost like an opposite therapy to do this, but it works. So it's an interesting way to do it. So the next topic I'm going to talk about is overcoming hate. So she gave a very interesting relationship with hate and fear, and instead of linking hate with anger, she linked it with fear. So
this morning to some of Burmese Americans, and I made the point that hate and fear are linked together. And when you hate somebody, you must really ask yourself why. And you will find that it is because you fear that he may hurt you in some way, he or she. I do not think you can actually hate anybody unless you have this fear, the fear that he or she will be able to hurt you, may be able to hurt you in some way. So if you want to get over your hate, you must get over your fear first.
Yeah, so I think what I took away from this is that hate and fear kind of linked together, and I like the way she related it, and it actually, when I come to think of it, it really makes sense, because it makes sense that you don't really hate a person, and the only way you can really actually hate a person is because you really actually fear that they can hurt you in some manner. So, the next quality I would like to talk about was selflessness and love. So I think the way she showed this was just basically showing universal love by loving her enemies and also her country. And I think this you can probably see in many heroes, she and Gandhi and any superhero, or you can see this in a smaller version with a family member. Because a lot of times people take love as a way to do something for the people they love instead of just expressing their love by giving a hug or saying I love you, but instead actually doing something. And she changed her country, right? And then so she took her love and then made it into making a great movement, helping this whole thing. So now she brought change into her country. So first she had made a comment that she said she had a soft spot for people in a military uniform, which I found kind of strange because those were the people who she was rebelling against, and she didn't exactly like what they were doing. But she said she had a soft spot for making this interesting relation.
Inside.
Well, I'm in a very unusual position because my father was the founder of the Burmese army, and my first memories of my father are of him in uniform. In the photographs, I don't remember him because I was only 2 when he died. But most of the photographs we had of him around the house showed him in uniform. And of course, I was brought up to understand that he was the father of the Burmese army. And the soldiers of the army used to refer to him as their father. And in fact, when I was growing up, ordinary soldiers, complete strangers, would address my mother as mother. So I grew up with the feeling that I was part of the army family, and of course there were also my father's old soldiers who were always coming and going. Because of that, I could never really hate the generals, although I hated what they were doing.
So yeah, I think she said this in a very interesting manner because she said that she she showed that you can love a person without loving what they're doing, because she did hate what they were doing. And that's what, when she said that, it later made sense to me, that she, even though she did not like what they were doing, she still could have a soft spot for them, even if they didn't like the person's actions. Okay, so the next quality is being disciplined and following her principles, which I think she said principles were a very important thing in her life, and she followed what she knew was the right thing to do. And if that cost her a lot, she still did it because she knew it was the right thing to do. And I think that's like a great quality for a person to have. So first, there is a story of a trespasser she spoke about. So she was supposed to be freed in about 2010 or 9, and she said that, and because of this whole trespasser issue, they increased their house arrest by another year, so she wasn't able to be there for the elections, which is an important thing for her party. And like a regular person would probably say that they were really angry with like the trespasser, right? Because like they just like ruined her entire chance, but like she just looks at it as this interesting matter, and instead of doing what like the military wanted her to do, she did what she knew was the right thing to do, even though it cost her that year, but she missed the elections.
2000 no, I was freed in 10, but I should have been freed in 2009. But they were planning elections for 2010. I think most of the people here may perhaps have heard of the American who came swimming into my garden, and because I did not hand him over to the police, I did not hand him over to the authorities as a matter of principle. There was no rule of law in our country, and all our people who were arrested because of the political activities were denied proper justice. And as a matter of principle, I felt I could not hand over anybody into the hands of those who would not give him the justice that was the due of every human being.
So, like, I think was pretty clear by what she said. She stuck to her principles, even though it cost her a lot to do so. She still realized that that was the right thing to do, and no matter what, she did it, which I think is a pretty important thing for like anybody. I think to like do the right thing, even though it costs them to do something. You can see this in many great leaders and like even like movie superheroes and like family members sometimes. So yeah, and then. So next is she spoke about how she approached problems. She stayed focused one step at a time, which I thought was an interesting way to do it, and it actually works quite well. She explained it as a approach to when a pressure cooker explodes.
To a pressure cooker blowing off. This happened to me actually. In fact, I was cooking and I was not looking at the pressure cooker very carefully, so. Do we still have pressure cookers?
We do. You, not really.
I don't know what kind of developments there have been over the last couple of decades. I can't keep up with every one of them. And anyway, the pressure cooker exploded because I wasn't watching it carefully. And everything went all over the room. And for a second, I felt panic. And then I thought, no, let's see what we do next. Okay, we turn off the gas. And then we have to take a sponge, and then we mop up the mess, and so on and so on. So I took it one step at a time, and that calmed me down. And that is a lesson. I decided that whenever there's a crisis to be met, then you just do what you can, one step at a time.
So I think this was a very interesting way to look at a problem, and so I have an example from my own life. It's like math, because I have math classes, and once we had a logic problem that involved various different equations, and I was supposed to work with this boy, and he was like a really, really smart kid who could always like solve the problems really fast. So, and when I looked at the problem, I completely panicked. It looked huge to me. I'm like, how are we going to do this? We only have like 5 minutes, and this was like a test she had given us to like qualify for something. And but then I was amazed by the way he did it. So what he did was immediately he started writing. So here are the different equations. This one doesn't work because of this reason, so he crossed it out. This one doesn't work, and then in 5 minutes we solved the problem. And like it's helped me now with similar problems because it just seems so easy now when I look at it. I mean, I'm like, how could I look at this in such a, like, how could I see that it's so hard? I mean, it looks so easy now. And so yeah, I think the main thing we can look at this is instead of panicking when we see a seemingly unsolvable problem, is we can basically just take it one step at a time and say, okay, so here's the first thing I do, here's the second thing I do, instead of just completely losing it. And okay, so the next thing she talked about was taking responsibility for one's actions. She used the example of the previous military regime in Burma and how they blamed everything on their previous British government, which made them feel that they were doing everything right and the British government had completely messed up the country, and that was probably like a wrong way to see it, and that if they didn't do that, that would probably not cause the people to rebel.
One's private life. One of the big weaknesses of the previous military regime was that they blamed others for whatever went wrong in the country. We had gained our independence in 1948. Still, the regime was blaming the colonial administration for the ills of the country. They never once blamed themselves. Everything was due to what the colonial government had done way back in the past. And that...
So basically what she's showing is that like they kind of had this delusion that they were doing everything right, and basically, which they weren't, and they felt that they were doing it right, and that just made them to feel this way, but they actually thought it was wrong, and then that just led to them kind of ruining the whole thing in the country, which did not work out very well, because if you look at them now, they probably are not doing very well. And this kind of can help us in like various manners. Like, it may not be as extreme as they're doing it, but if you actually think about yourself, sometimes people like to feel, even on small issues, like if they're working in a group, for example, and their project doesn't work out really well. I used to have this problem when I was at school in India. I used to feel it was all because of some person out there not bringing their stuff. And I used to have this delusion that I was doing everything right and it's not my fault, and we should not have done this because I told them to. But when you come to think of it, my dad used to tell me this when I used to be really unhappy about it. He told me that it's not about faults, it's instead about what you did and could you have done better, and could you have maybe helped it, and you should and how he said you take responsibility for their actions, not just your actions, which I found a very confusing thing in the beginning, but I think if you had, if the government that she was talking about instead, if they had said, even if the British government had done some stuff which is wrong, they could have taken responsibility and said that, you know what, now we're going to do something about it. Instead of saying that it's all their fault, and even the stuff that they were doing, which is wrong, that they blamed that on them as well. So then she was asked what was her message to people, anyone who looked up to her. She just basically spoke about principles, which I think she said was one of the most important parts, and that's what she wanted people to take away from her story.
From your experiences.
That principles are not an old-fashioned idea. Principles matter. You have to build your life on principles. You have to build your life on a sense of duty. These are not old-fashioned ideas. If you build your life on a sense of duty, on principles, you will find that you're that much better able to meet the challenges that life will throw at you.
And when she was saying this, at first I was finding it a little bit confusing, but when I thought about this, I felt that what I took away from this was building your life on principles and a sense of duty. And I think my father's already talked about setting goals and stuff. Yeah, so basically that's kind of what she was meaning there. And then you're doing what you know is the right thing to do. And having a sense of duty and knowing what you're supposed to work towards doing, and instead of just living a life with like just living and you're not really making a difference in your life, you're not doing good, you're just like doing whatever you think is that you want to do at that point of time, which you just feel like doing, but that may not always be the right thing. And so that